You know, right in the heart of modern India, there was once a kingdom bigger than England and Scotland put together, and it just vanished. This is the story of a dramatic and honestly an often overlooked chapter of history, the fall of the incredible princely state of Hyderabad.
So, let's set the scene. The year is 1947. The British Empire is crumbling, and the map of India is being, well, violently redrawn. And right smack in the middle of all that chaos is this massive question mark, Hyderabad. We're talking about the wealthiest princely state in the entire land, and it's facing this impossible choice. A choice that's not just going to decide its own future, but the very shape of a new nation.
Okay, so with the British out of the picture, Hyderabad's ruler, the Nizam, finds himself at this huge crossroads. I mean, the old world he knew? Gone. And the path forward? Yeah, it was anything but clear.
And I really need to stress the sheer scale we're talking about here. This wasn't some tiny little territory. Nope. Hyderabad was massive, it was rich, and its location was absolutely critical, sitting right in the heart of the subcontinent. So whatever it decided to do, it wasn't going to be a small footnote in a history book. It was going to change the map of South Asia, period.
So, the Nizam basically had three very different options on the table. First, he could join the new Hindu-majority India. Second, he could try for what would have been a really tricky union with the new state of Pakistan, given the geography. Or, and this was the one he really wanted, he could try to make Hyderabad its own completely independent country.
But here's where things get really complicated. See, the Nizam and his ruling elite were Muslim, but the vast majority of the people living there, we're talking over 82%, were Hindu. And that demographic split, it created this deep, dangerous political fault line right through the middle of the state.
Okay, so with pressure building up from literally every side, they came up with a temporary fix. It was basically a diplomatic move to just hit the pause button on this whole escalating crisis, you know? Just to buy everyone some time. They called it the one-year peace.
This fix was officially called the Standstill Agreement, and really, it was just a delay tactic. The idea was, for 1 year, everything would stay as it was, the status quo. Hyderabad wouldn't join India, but it also wouldn't declare independence. That final, potentially explosive decision, they just kicked it down the road.
But let's be honest, nobody was really fooled by this. As one source put it, it was actually a no-win situation. Just peace for 1 year. You could feel it. There was this sense that a bigger conflict was unavoidable. This wasn't a real solution, it was just a temporary ceasefire.
Which of course brings up the obvious question, right? Can you really put a problem this huge on hold for a year? Was there any way this fragile peace could actually last, with all the pressure building up, both inside and outside Hyderabad?
Well, spoiler alert, the answer was a big fat no. I mean, the ink was barely dry on that agreement before the whole situation started to spiral out of control. Diplomacy just fell apart, and these radical, violent groups stepped into the spotlight.
So why did the peace fall apart? Well, a few key things happened. First, Hyderabad gave a huge loan to Pakistan, and India saw that as a really hostile move. Then, inside Hyderabad, this radical militia called the Razakars started getting super powerful. Their leader was giving these intense, fiery speeches that divided everyone. Border raids started becoming a regular thing, and then a final attempt at negotiations just completely failed. The agreement was basically dead in the water.
And we have to talk more about these Razakars, because they were central to this whole breakdown. This wasn't just some small group of radicals. We're talking about a private army almost 200,000 men strong. They were fiercely dedicated to the idea of an independent Hyderabad, and they used brutal violence against anyone who even suggested joining India. They really created this widespread feeling of terror.
After that, things just started escalating fast. In June of '48, the last round of talks in Delhi collapses. A month later, in July, India hits Hyderabad with a severe economic blockade. By August, Hyderabad takes its case to the United Nations, trying to make it an international issue, but it was too late. By September, the Indian government had had enough. The decision was made to intervene militarily.
So India's military plan had a code name, Operation Polo. Now officially, they called it a police action. That was a very deliberate choice of words, right? To make it sound like an internal matter, not a full-blown invasion. But make no mistake, for Hyderabad, this was the end of the line. And wow, the whole thing was incredibly fast and decisive. On September 13th, the Indian Army entered Hyderabad from multiple directions. The state's own forces, and even those feared Razakars, were just completely overwhelmed. They were no match for a professional army. In just 5 days, it was all over. On September 17th, the Hyderabad army officially surrendered. And on that exact same day, the Nizam, the absolute ruler of what had been the wealthiest state in India, he gets on the radio. Can you imagine? He formally surrenders. He withdraws his complaint to the UN, and he bans the Razakars, the very militia that had been fighting in his name. Just like that, the dream of an independent Hyderabad was gone.
So, the political question was settled. But the story doesn't just end with the surrender. Not at all. The aftermath is where we see the real, profound human cost of all this, a story of loss that, honestly, still echoes today.
The immediate fallout was just stark. A dynasty that had ruled for more than 200 years, gone, overnight. The state was swallowed up by India, put under military administration at first, and in that chaotic power vacuum that followed, terrible communal violence broke out, and tens of thousands of people lost their lives.
You know, there's a book about this, and its dedication just completely reframes the whole thing. It's not dedicated to any victors or political ideas. It's dedicated to those tens of thousands dead and many more still silently suffering for their struggle in the cause of Hyderabad. That one sentence, it just transforms this from a political event into what it really was, a deep human tragedy.
So this leaves us with this really dual legacy, doesn't it? On the one hand, for the new nation of India, bringing Hyderabad into the fold was seen as an absolutely crucial step for national unity. But on the other hand, for so many people, the memory isn't one of integration, it's one of conquest. The memory of a unique culture and a whole independent state just lost. And that's why, even today, how you tell this story is deeply, deeply contested.
Ultimately, the story of this lost Hyderabad is so much more than just a dusty chapter in a history book. It really forces us to ask some big questions, you know? Like, how are nations actually born? What's the real price of unity? And maybe most importantly, which parts of our history do we choose to remember, and which ones do we choose to forget?